All right, joining us now, political analyst and author of the book Lessons in Leadership, Steve Adubato. Steve, thanks for being here tonight.
To be with you, Steve and Natasha.
All right, I want to talk about the governor's race. My big question for you is, at what point does race's tightening coverage stop being advantageous for the underdog in this race? Do you think we had enough of that coverage that it roused Democrats out of their slumber to vote for Kathy Hochul in the last minute?
You know, Steve, frankly, I do believe the Democrats and Governor Hochul miscalculated here. She should have been more upfront about the crime problem. She needed to acknowledge it earlier on. She needed to take Lee Zeldin more seriously. He has tapped into the fear that people have in New York, whether real or perceived. And listen, you look in the Post or a whole range of other papers every day, it feels really real to people. And when crime feels real, you need to acknowledge it. So with Clinton and Obama and Biden, everybody coming in at the last minute, the Democratic governor hopes it helps, but it may be too little too late. She needed to acknowledge this earlier on. I don't know what's going to happen, but this should not be close because there are way more Democrats in New York State than Republicans. It's been 20 plus years since a Republican was elected governor.
Yeah, and Steve, you know, another big race that we've been watching, Nicole Maliotakis reelected to the House for New York's 11th district. So what put her ahead of Max Rose?
Listen, Maliotakis knows this district. Max Rose was there before. The concern I have is about election deniers in all candor. She's an election denier. And here's the problem I have. Yes, she won the race. But are we really coming down to the question, if you don't win the race, you question the results. If you do win the race, then the race is fine. The election was fine. That gets to be scary because if people don't trust the results of an election, then democracy is in serious, serious trouble. She knows Staten Island. She's going to win this race. But we need to acknowledge the results, win or lose.
Indeed. All right, Steve, we appreciate your perspective right now. We're going to check back in with you in the next half hour as well. Steve Adubato, thank you very much.
You got it.
Political analyst Steve Adubato joining us for more in-depth coverage of the key races, how they're shaking out tonight. Let's talk about the governor's race. It does seem like the GOP is having a good night in the congressional races in New York. Does that shade how you view the governor's race ultimately playing out?
You know, every race, Steve, is an individual race. And as I said earlier on the news, is that Governor Hochul needed to acknowledge the issue of crime. But we don't also know whether Lee Zeldin tapped into enough people, particularly in suburban areas outside of New York City, on the issues of the economy, inflation, the anti-Biden, if you will, sentiment out there. She may hold on, but you got to remember, New York has so many more Democratic registered voters than Republicans. It should not be a close race. But it may be. Don't know how it's going to play out. It's going to be a long night across the country, in Georgia, in Arizona, in Pennsylvania. It's a long night to count these votes and get them right.
Yeah, likely going to be a while before we know the full picture for sure. All right, Steve Adubato was brief, but we do appreciate your expertise with us tonight.
My pleasure.